The white lace of Natalie Grayson's wedding dress dragged through the dusty street of Casa Grande, Arizona territory. As she stumbled out of the small wooden chapel, tears streaming down her face and leaving tracks through the powder on her cheeks. The morning sun beat down mercilessly on this June day in 1878, and the heat seemed to match the burning humiliation that consumed her entire body as she realized that Thomas Whitmore, the man she had promised to spend her life with, had not shown up to their wedding. The guests had waited for 2 hours, whispering among themselves with increasing volume until finally her father had checked the boarding house where Thomas had been staying, only to find his room empty and his belongings gone, along with the $300 Natalie had foolishly given him last week for what he claimed were investments in a new cattle venture. She had nowhere to go except back to her father's small ranch outside of town, but the thought of facing him again after he had warned her about Thomas made her stomach turn. Her mother had died 3 years ago, and her father had become a hard man, practical and unforgiving of mistakes. This would be the ultimate proof that she was the foolish girl he often accused her of being. The wedding dress had cost nearly everything she had saved from teaching school for the past 2 years, and now it was ruined, the hem brown with dirt and torn where she had tripped coming down the chapel steps. Natalie sat down heavily on the bench outside the general store, not caring that people were staring at her through the windows or that Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house was shaking her head with that infuriating mixture of pity and satisfaction that some women got when witnessing another's downfall. She pulled the veil from her head and let it fall to the ground beside her. The orange blossoms she had woven into her dark brown hair that morning now seemed like a cruel joke. She was 22 years old, had turned down 2 other proposals in the past year because she thought she loved Thomas, and now she was sitting in the middle of town in a wedding dress with no groom, no money, and no prospects. The sound of horse hooves on the packed earth made her look up, though she wished she could simply disappear. A tall man on a dusty buckskin horse was riding slowly down the main street, his hat pulled low against the sun. He wore worn leather chaps over dark pants, a faded blue shirt, and a bandana around his neck. A rifle rested in the scabbard on his saddle, and saddlebags bulged with supplies. He looked like he had been traveling for a long time, and he probably would have ridden right past if she had not been wearing that ridiculous white dress that stood out like a beacon. He pulled his horse to a stop in front of her and pushed his hat back, revealing a young face weathered by sun and wind. He could not have been more than 25 or 26, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that were an unusual shade of hazel, almost gold in the bright sunlight. There was a long scar along his jawline that looked like it had come from a knife rather than a fall, but his expression was kind as he took in her tear-stained face and ruined dress. "You all right, miss?" His voice was deep and quiet, the accent suggesting he was from somewhere further north, maybe Colorado or Wyoming. Natalie let out a laugh that sounded slightly hysterical even to her own ears. "Do I look all right?" He studied her for a moment, then swung down from his horse with an easy grace. Up close, she could see that he was even taller than she had thought, probably over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean build of someone who spent all day in the saddle. "I have seen better days for most folks," he admitted. "What happened? What does it look like? I got left at the altar." The words came out bitter and sharp. "The man I was supposed to marry took my money and ran off sometime last night. So here I sit in this stupid dress that cost me everything, with nowhere to go and everyone in town watching me like I am some kind of circus act." The cowboy looked around at the windows where faces quickly ducked back behind curtains. Seems like a coward's move, leaving a woman like that. A woman like what? Natalie asked, suddenly defensive. Pretty. Brave enough to sit here instead of hiding. He said it matter-of-factly, without any of the smooth charm that Thomas had used. Where were you planning to go after the wedding? We were going to move to his ranch up near Prescott. Except there probably is not any ranch, is there? That was probably just another lie. She felt fresh tears threatening and blinked them back angrily. Why am I telling you this? You are just passing through. Maybe. He was quiet for a moment, his hand resting on his horse's neck. What is your name? Natalie Grayson. She waited for recognition, for the pity, but he just nodded. I am Zachary Morgan. Most people call me Zach. He glanced back at the chapel, then at her. Were there witnesses in there, a preacher? Yes, Reverend Calloway is still inside, probably trying to figure out what to tell everyone. Why? What Zach said next made her wonder if the heat had affected her hearing. I will marry you today. Natalie stared at him. What? You need a husband, seems like. I could use a wife. I have a small ranch up in Colorado near a town called Silver Creek. It is not much, but it is mine, and it is honest work. You would have a roof over your head and food on the table. I would not ask for anything you were not willing to give, and I would treat you decent. He said it calmly, as if he were discussing the weather or the price of cattle. You are insane. She stood up, wobbling slightly in the too tight shoes she had borrowed from her neighbor. You do not even know me. I know you got left by a man who did not deserve you. I know you are sitting here instead of running home crying, which suggests you have some spine. I know you clean up real nice, even after crying. A hint of a smile crossed his face, and I know you probably do not have a lot of options right now. He was right about that, and they both knew it. In a town like Casa Grande, being jilted at the altar was not something people forgot. She would be the subject of gossip for months, maybe years. Her father would take her back, but she would spend the rest of her life hearing about her mistake, about how she should have listened to him. The thought made her feel trapped and desperate. I do not love you, she said, testing him. Did not expect you to. Love can come later if we are lucky. Plenty of marriages start with less. He adjusted his hat. I am not a rich man, but I am honest. I do not drink to excess, I do not gamble, and I have never raised a hand to a woman. I can read and write and do figures. I have 200 acres of good grazing land and about 50 head of cattle. The house needs work, but it is solid. You would have your own room until you decided otherwise. Natalie felt like she was in a dream or perhaps a nightmare. Why would you do this? You could find a wife anywhere. Maybe. He looked away toward the mountains in the distance. My mother was left by my father when I was 10, took up with another woman and just rode off one day. She never recovered from the shame of it, from everyone knowing he had abandoned her. She died 5 years later, and I always thought the heartbreak had as much to do with it as the fever. I do not like seeing a woman in that position. There was a rawness in his voice that made her believe him. This was not some knight-errant looking for adventure. This was a man who had seen pain and recognized it in someone else. She studied his face, looking for signs of cruelty or deception, but found only patience and something that might have been understanding. I do not even know you, she repeated, but with less conviction this time. Then ask me questions. We have got time. He gestured to the bench, and she sat down again, her dress pooling around her like sea foam. He remained standing, one hand still on his horse's reins. Where are you from originally? Born in Missouri, but my mother moved us to Colorado after my father left. I have been ranching since I was 15, working for other men until I saved enough to buy my own place 3 years ago. You have other family? No. My mother was an only child, and her parents died before I was born. Far as I know, my father is still alive somewhere, but I have not seen him in 16 years and have no interest in changing that. Why were you traveling through Arizona? Came down to buy breeding stock. There is a ranch near Tucson that had cattle I wanted. I am heading back now. He paused. If you came with me, we would marry here today, proper legal wedding, then head north. It is about a 3-week journey, maybe a bit less if the weather holds. Natalie tried to imagine traveling for 3 weeks with this stranger who wanted to marry her. It seemed impossibly reckless, the kind of thing that young girls were warned against in cautionary tales. But what was the alternative? Go back to her father and spend the rest of her life as the spinster daughter who had been too stupid to see through a con man. Try to keep teaching school while everyone whispered about her. Casa Grande was not a big town. There were no other prospects here, no other options that did not involve years of shame and poverty. What would you expect from me? She asked carefully. As your wife. Zach met her eyes steadily. Cooking, cleaning, the usual household work, help with the ranch when needed, honesty. Respect if I earn it. Like I said, you would have your own room. When and if you decided you wanted more from the marriage, that would be your choice. I would not force anything. That is not how most men think about marriage. I am not most men. He said it simply, a statement of fact rather than boast. My mother taught me that a woman is not property, no matter what the law says. I figure a marriage works better when both people are willing participants in all aspects. Natalie looked down at her hands, twisted together in her lap. The ring Thomas had given her, a cheap brass band he had claimed was gold, dug into her finger. She pulled it off and threw it as hard as she could into the street. It bounced twice and disappeared into the dust. If I did this, she said slowly, if I married you, could I bring my things? I have books and some clothes and my mother's sewing machine. We can fit what we can carry. If there is more, we can arrange to have it shipped later. He seemed to sense that she was actually considering it because he crouched down so they were at eye level. I know this is sudden. I know you have got no reason to trust me. But I give you my word, Natalie Grayson, that if you say yes, I will do right by you. I will provide for you and protect you and treat you with respect. That is the best I can offer. She looked into those gold hazel eyes and made a decision that was either the bravest or most foolish thing she had ever done. All right, yes, I will marry you. Zach nodded once, then stood and offered her his hand. She took it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip as he pulled her to her feet. Her legs felt shaky, but whether from fear or relief or shock, she could not tell. We should go talk to the Reverend, he said. Get this done proper. They walked back to the chapel together, Zach leading his horse. Natalie could feel eyes watching them from every window, could imagine the conversations that would explode across Casa Grande within the hour. Let them talk. She was leaving this town anyway, heading somewhere new with a man who had offered her an escape when she had none. Inside the chapel, Reverend Calloway was still there, talking quietly with Natalie's father. John Grayson looked up as they entered, his weathered face creasing with confusion and then anger as he saw his daughter with a stranger. Natalie, where have you been? We need to get you home and out of that dress. No, father, I am getting married. She lifted her chin, trying to project a confidence she did not feel. This is Zachary Morgan. He has asked me to marry him and I have said yes. Her father stared at her like she had lost her mind. You do not even know this man. You cannot just marry some drifter off the street. I am not a drifter, Zach said quietly. I own a ranch in Colorado. I have money in the bank and can provide for your daughter. I know this is sudden, but I give you my word that I will take care of her. Your word, John Grayson's voice rose. What is that worth? I do not know you. How do I know you are not another Thomas Whitmore, looking to take advantage of a foolish girl? Natalie felt her face flush with anger and embarrassment. "I am standing right here, Father, and I have made my decision. I am 22 years old. I do not need your permission." "You need sense, which you clearly do not have." Her father turned to Zach. "Did she tell you she gave the last man $300? Did she tell you she turned down perfectly good proposals to wait for a con man?" "She told me she got left at the altar by a coward," Zach said. "That is all I need to know. The rest is her business, not mine." Reverend Calloway had been watching this exchange with increasing interest. He was an older man, probably close to 60, with kind eyes and a gentle manner. "Mr. Grayson, if I may. Your daughter has had a terrible shock today, but she seems to have found someone willing to stand by her. That is more than can be said for Mr. Whitmore. Perhaps we should trust her judgment." "Her judgment?" John Grayson laughed bitterly. "Her judgment got us into this mess." Natalie felt something break inside her. "Then you should be glad to be rid of me. Reverend Calloway, will you perform the ceremony?" The Reverend looked between Natalie and Zach, then at her furious father. "Are you both of age and entering this marriage willingly?" "Yes," they said in unison. "Do you have a marriage license? We can use the one I got for Thomas." Natalie's voice was steady now. "It just has the bride and groom's name blank, waiting to be filled in." "That is highly irregular, but I suppose it will serve." Reverend Calloway picked up his Bible from the front pew. "Very well, if you are both certain, we will proceed." Her father made a sound of disgust and turned to leave. "Do not come crying to me when this one robs you too." "I will not," Natalie said to his retreating back. She felt tears threatening again but refused to let them fall. Not now. Not in front of him. Zach moved closer to her, not quite touching but near enough that she could feel his presence, solid and real. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. "Last chance to change your mind." She looked at him, really looked at him. He had an honest face, tired and weathered but honest. His clothes were worn but clean. His hands were rough with work but gentle when he had helped her up. And most importantly, he was here, standing beside her when everyone else had either abandoned her or judged her. "I am sure." The ceremony was short and simple. There were no guests, no music, no flowers beyond the drooping orange blossoms still tangled in Natalie's hair. Reverend Calloway spoke the traditional words, asked the traditional questions. Zach's responses were quiet but firm. Natalie's voice shook only once when she said, "I do." When it came time for a ring, Zach pulled a piece of braided leather from his pocket. "I do not have a ring yet, but this will serve for now. We can get you a proper one in the next town." He tied the leather around her finger with surprising gentleness, and somehow that makeshift ring felt more real than the brass band Thomas had given her. It was honest, at least. It was what Zach had to offer, and he was not pretending it was something better. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Calloway said. "You may kiss your bride." Zach looked at her, a question in his eyes. Natalie nodded slightly, and he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, brief and chaste but somehow more intimate than any kiss she had shared with Thomas. When he pulled back, his cheeks were slightly flushed. "Mrs. Morgan," he said, trying out the name. "Mr. Morgan," she replied, and felt a strange mixture of terror and relief wash over her. They signed the marriage certificate. Reverend Calloway added his signature as witness. And just like that, Natalie Grayson became Natalie Morgan. The whole thing had taken less than 15 minutes. Her entire life had changed in less than 15 minutes. Outside the chapel, the sun was even higher and hotter. Zach untied his horse and looked at Natalie. "We should get you out of that dress and gather your things. How far is your father's place?" "About 3 miles west of town, but I do not want to go back there." The thought of facing her father again, of seeing his disappointment and anger, made her feel sick. You will need clothes for the journey, dresses, undergarments, shoes, whatever you want to bring that is yours. He will not let me in. He does not have much choice. You are married now, but those are still your belongings. Zach's voice was gentle but firm. I will come with you. We will be quick about it. They walked through town, Zach leading his horse and Natalie struggling to keep her skirts out of the dirt. People stared openly now, whispering to each other. Mrs. Henderson actually stepped out of the boarding house to get a better look. Is that the cowboy who married her? Natalie heard her say to Mrs. Chen from the laundry. Poor man does not know what he is getting into. Zach must have heard too because his jaw tightened, but he did not respond. He just kept walking, staying close enough to Natalie that it was clear they were together. When they reached the edge of town, Zach stopped and turned to her. Can you ride? Yes, but not in this dress. Climb up behind me. We will make better time. He mounted easily, then reached down to help her up. It was awkward and undignified with her dress bunching up around her legs, but somehow she managed to settle behind him on the horse. Hold on to me, he said, and she wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the solid muscle beneath his shirt. They rode out toward her father's ranch at a steady canter. Natalie had made this journey hundreds of times, but it felt different now, sitting behind Zach on his horse, her wedding dress billowing out behind them. The land was dry and brown, dotted with scrub, brush, and cactus. In the distance, she could see the mountains, hazy in the heat. She had lived in this area her whole life, and now she was leaving, heading north to a place she had never seen with a man she had just met. Her father's ranch was small, just a simple wooden house and a barn and a few outbuildings. It had never been prosperous, but it had been home. She could see her father's horse tied outside, which meant he had beaten them here. That was not a good sign. Zach helped her down from the horse and tied it to the rail outside. Let me talk to him first. He is my father, I should be the one, and he is angry right now. Give me a minute. Zach walked up to the door and knocked firmly. When John Grayson opened it, his face already red with anger, Zach spoke before he could. Mr. Grayson, I know you are upset and you have got a right to be, but we need to collect Natalie's belongings. We will be quick and out of your way. She made her choice. She can live with it. She can and she will. But those are her things, bought with her own money or left to her by her mother. You cannot keep them from her. Natalie's father looked past Zach to where she stood, still in her ruined wedding dress. For a moment, something like regret crossed his face, but it was quickly replaced by stubbornness. Fine. Take what you want, but do not expect to come back here when this one leaves you too. Natalie pushed past Zach and her father, hurrying to the small room that had been hers since childhood. It was not much, just a bed and a dresser and a trunk for her clothes, but it was familiar. She pulled off the wedding dress with shaking hands, not caring that it tore as she struggled with the buttons. Underneath, she wore a simple cotton shift. She pulled on her everyday dress, a practical brown calico, and her own sturdy boots. Then she began pulling clothes from the dresser and trunk, folding them quickly and stuffing them into a canvas bag. Her mother's sewing machine sat in the corner, too big to carry easily. Her books lined a small shelf her father had built when she was 10. Her mother's Bible, with all the family names and dates written inside. The quilt her grandmother had made. How do you choose what to take when you are leaving your whole life behind? Zach appeared in the doorway. We can come back for more later or have things shipped. Take what is most important. The sewing machine, my mother's Bible, the books. She was crying now, silent tears running down her face as she looked around the room. I will get the sewing machine. You gather the rest. He moved past her and lifted the machine easily, as if it weighed nothing. Does it have a case under the bed? She pulled out the wooden case, and he carefully placed the machine inside, then carried it out to where his horse was tied. Natalie filled the canvas bag with clothes, then added her mother's Bible, wrapped carefully in a shawl. The books would not all fit, so she chose her favorites. A volume of poetry, a novel by Charles Dickens, a book of folk tales her mother had read to her as a child. She added her mother's cameo brooch, the one nice piece of jewelry she owned. Last, she folded the quilt and tucked it under her arm. When she emerged from her room, her father was standing in the main room, watching Zach secure the sewing machine to his saddle. He looked older than she remembered, the lines on his face deeper, his hair grayer. "Natalie." His voice stopped her. "I am not trying to be cruel, I am trying to protect you. You are trying to control me," she said quietly. "There is a difference. Thomas was your choice as much as mine. You said he was a good prospect, that I should accept his proposal. I was wrong about him, I will admit that, but that does not mean I am wrong now. Maybe not, but it is my mistake to make if it is one." She looked at the house, memorizing it. "Tell me something, Father." "Did you love Mother when you married her?" He looked startled by the question. "It was an arranged match. Our fathers worked it out. Love came later." "Then maybe I am doing the same thing, just in a different way." She walked past him toward the door, then paused. "I will write when we reach Colorado. If you reach Colorado." She did not respond to that. Outside, Zach had everything secured and was waiting patiently by his horse. The sun was past its zenith now, beginning the long slide toward evening. They had lost most of the day to this strange, impulsive marriage. "We should stay in town tonight," Zach said. "Get a room at the boarding house, start fresh in the morning. Everyone will talk. They are already talking. At least this way you get a good night's sleep in a real bed before we start traveling." He helped her mount the horse, then climbed up in front of her. Her bag and the quilt were tied behind the saddle with the sewing machine. She wrapped her arms around his waist again, and they rode back toward Casa Grande. The boarding house was run by Mrs. Henderson, who had been one of the women gossiping about Natalie earlier. She looked shocked when they walked in, Natalie still in her simple dress, Zach carrying her bag. "We need a room for the night," Zach said. "My wife and I are heading north in the morning." Mrs. Henderson's eyes went wide at the word wife, but she was too much of a businesswoman to turn away paying customers. "I've got a room on the second floor. $2 for the night, including breakfast." "That is fine." Zach paid her, and she handed him a key. The room was small but clean, with a double bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. Zach set down the bag and stood awkwardly near the door. The intimacy of being in a bedroom with a man, even one who was now legally her husband, made Natalie's heart race. "I can sleep on the floor," Zach said. "Or in the stable with the horse, if you would rather. The bed is big enough for both of us if we stay on our own sides." She was proud that her voice did not shake. "All right." He removed his hat and ran a hand through his hair. "I need to see to my horse and get some supplies for the journey. Will you be all right here for an hour or so?" "Yes." She was suddenly exhausted, the emotional toll of the day catching up with her. "I think I will rest." "Good idea. We have got a long few weeks ahead." He hesitated, then added, "You did well today, took courage." After he left, Natalie sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process everything that had happened. This morning she had been Natalie Grayson, about to marry Thomas Whitmore and move to Prescott. Now she was Natalie Morgan, married to a man she had met only hours ago, about to travel to Colorado. It was insane. It was reckless. It was quite possibly the biggest mistake of her life. But when she thought about the alternative, about staying in Casa Grande and facing the gossip and pity and her father's disappointment every single day, this seemed like the better choice. At least this way she had a chance at something new. At least Zachary Morgan had been honest about what he could offer her, unlike Thomas with his lies and false promises. She lay down on the bed, still in her dress and boots, and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the light outside had changed. It was nearly dusk. She sat up groggily and saw Zach sitting in the chair by the window, reading a newspaper. How long was I asleep? Couple of hours. I brought up some dinner if you are hungry. He gestured to a tray on the small table. There was bread and cheese and cold chicken with a jar of preserved peaches. Natalie realized she had not eaten anything since breakfast, before the wedding that never happened. Her stomach growled loudly and Zach smiled. Go ahead. I already ate. She attacked the food gratefully and he went back to his newspaper, giving her space. When she finished, she felt more human. Thank you. You are welcome. He folded the newspaper and set it aside. I was thinking about our route. We will head north toward Flagstaff, then up through Utah Territory into Colorado. There are towns along the way where we can resupply. It will take about 3 weeks, like I said, maybe a bit longer depending on the weather and how fast we can travel. I have never been outside Arizona Territory. Utah is beautiful, especially the Red Rock country. Colorado, too, in a different way. Mountains and forests, good grazing land. His voice took on a note of pride. My ranch is in a valley with a creek running through it. That is how it got the name Silver Creek. The water runs over rocks that shine in the sunlight like silver. It sounds nice. It is. Small, like I said, but it is mine. Built the house myself with some help from neighbors. It is just 2 rooms right now, but I was planning to add on. He paused. I suppose I will need to do that sooner now. The reality of their situation hit Natalie again. This man had been planning a solitary life, and now he had a wife. Why did you really offer to marry me? And do not tell me it was just because of your mother. Zach was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at the darkening street. I have been alone for a long time. Not lonely exactly, but alone. Working every day, building something, but with no one to share it with. I always figured I would find a wife eventually, but in Silver Creek, there are not many women, and the ones who are there are already married or much too young. He looked at her. When I saw you sitting there in that wedding dress, so angry and hurt but still holding yourself together, I thought, here is a woman with strength. Here is someone who could handle ranch life, and I thought maybe we could help each other out. That is very practical. I am a practical man. But that does not mean I do not hope for more eventually. His gold hazel eyes met hers directly. I meant what I said about respect. You will have your own space, your own time, but I am hoping that eventually we can build something real, a partnership, maybe even affection if we are lucky. Natalie considered this. It was more than Thomas had ever offered with his pretty words that had turned out to be lies. I can try. That is all I can promise. That is all I am asking. They prepared for bed awkwardly, taking turns changing behind the dressing screen. Zach offered Natalie the side of the bed near the window, and he stayed on the very edge of his side as far from her as possible. In the darkness, Natalie could hear him breathing, steady and even. It should have been strange, sharing a bed with a man she barely knew, but instead she felt oddly safe. Whatever else Zachary Morgan might be, he was a man of his word. She fell asleep to the sound of his breathing and the distant noise of the town settling in for the night. Morning came early. Zach was already up and dressed when Natalie woke, looking out the window at the street below. We should get moving soon. I want to make good distance today. Mrs. Henderson's breakfast was hearty, eggs and bacon and fresh bread with butter. They ate quickly, aware of the other guests staring at them and whispering. Natalie kept her head high, refusing to show any embarrassment. Let them think what they wanted. She was leaving. Zach had bought a second horse the evening before, a gentle mare that he said would be easier for Natalie to ride. Her name is Rosie. The man I bought her from said she has a good temperament and can handle a long journey. Rosie was a pretty chestnut with a white blaze on her face. Natalie stroked her nose and the mare nickered softly. "Hello, girl. I guess we are traveling companions now." Loading their supplies took some time. Zach had bought additional food, blankets, and a canvas tarp for shelter. Natalie's belongings were distributed between the two horses. The sewing machine was carefully wrapped and secured on Rosie, since she would be carrying less weight overall. By the time they left Casa Grande, it was mid-morning. Natalie looked back once at the town where she had spent her whole life, but she did not feel the pang of regret she had expected. Instead, she felt a sense of relief. Whatever lay ahead in Colorado, it had to be better than staying here. The first day of travel was harder than Natalie had anticipated. She was used to riding, but not for hours at a time. By mid-afternoon, her back and legs were aching, and she was grateful when Zach finally called a halt near a small creek. "We will rest the horses and have some lunch," he said, helping her dismount. "How are you holding up?" "I am fine." It was a lie, and they both knew it, but she was determined not to complain. We do not have to make huge distances every day. Better to go steady than to push too hard and wear ourselves out. He unpacked bread and dried beef while she sat on a rock by the creek, dangling her sore feet in the cool water. "Tell me about Silver Creek," she said as they ate. "The town, I mean. What is it like?" "Small. Maybe 200 people. There is a general store, a blacksmith, a saloon, a church. Doctor comes through once a month. Most folks are ranchers or miners. It is quiet, which suits me." He tossed a piece of bread to a brave squirrel that had ventured close. "The nearest big town is about 30 miles north. That is where we go when we need supplies the general store does not carry." "Do you have friends there?" "Some. The Hendersons, they own the ranch next to mine. Good people. Then there is Tom Sawyer, runs the general store. His wife Mary is real nice. She will probably be glad to meet you. Like I said, there are not many women in the area." "What about church?" "You said there is one. Small building, serves multiple denominations. Preacher comes every other week, rotates between a few towns. When he is not there, folks just gather and read the Bible together." He glanced at her. "Are you religious?" "My mother was." "I suppose I am too, though I have not been as faithful about church as I should be." She thought of her mother's Bible, packed carefully in her bag. "Do you believe in God?" "I believe there is something bigger than us. Whether it matches what the preachers say, I cannot be sure. But I think trying to live right is important regardless." He stood and stretched. "We should keep moving. I want to get a few more miles in before we camp for the night." They rode until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Zach found a spot near another creek, with scrub trees for shelter. He set up a camp with practiced efficiency, spreading the canvas tarp between trees to create a lean-to, starting a fire, unpacking supplies. "Can I help?" Natalie asked, feeling useless. "Can you cook over an open fire?" "I can try," he smiled. "That is all anyone can do. Here, I will show you." He set up a tripod over the fire and hung a pot from it. "We will make a simple stew tonight. Just need to chop some vegetables and add them to the water with the dried beef." Natalie took the knife he offered and began chopping the carrots and potatoes he laid out. It was familiar work, and she found it soothing. They worked in comfortable silence, and soon the stew was bubbling over the fire, filling the air with a savory smell. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped quickly. Natalie wrapped one of the blankets around her shoulders and sat near the fire. Above them, stars were beginning to appear, more than she had ever seen in town. "It is beautiful," she said softly. Zach looked up from where he was checking the horses. Wait until we get further north. Even more stars, so many you feel like you could reach up and touch them. They ate the stew straight from the pot, passing it back and forth. It was not fancy, but it was hot and filling. After dinner, Zach arranged their bedrolls under the lean-to, leaving a respectful distance between them. "Will we be safe out here?" Natalie asked, eyeing the darkness beyond their fire. "Safe enough. I will keep the fire going and we will take turns keeping watch." "I do not know how to keep watch. Just stay awake and listen. If you hear anything unusual, wake me up. I will take the first watch. You get some sleep." Natalie lay down on her bedroll, but despite her exhaustion, sleep did not come easily. Every sound made her tense, every rustle in the brush or call of a night bird. She was acutely aware of Zach sitting by the fire, his rifle across his lap, keeping watch. Eventually, exhaustion won out and she drifted off. She woke to Zach gently shaking her shoulder. "Your turn. Just for a few hours, then I will take over again." Sitting by the fire in the middle of the night, wrapped in blankets against the cold, Natalie had time to think about her new situation. 2 days ago, she had been preparing to marry Thomas, believing she was in love, planning a future. Now she was camped under the stars with a man she barely knew, traveling toward a life she could not quite imagine. It should have terrified her, but instead she felt a strange sense of possibility. Her old life had been narrow, confined by her father's expectations and the limitations of Casa Grande. This new life, whatever it turned out to be, was wide open. The sky was beginning to lighten when Zach woke again. "I can take over now. You did well. Nothing happened." That is usually how it goes, but it is still important. He stoked the fire and began making coffee, the smell bitter and rich in the cold morning air. They fell into a rhythm over the next few days. Wake at dawn, eat a simple breakfast, pack up camp, ride until afternoon with a brief rest at midday, make camp before dark, eat dinner, sleep. The landscape slowly changed as they traveled north. The flat desert gave way to rolling hills, then to higher elevation with scattered pine trees. Zach proved to be a patient teacher, showing Natalie how to read the land, how to find the best camping spots, how to care for the horses. At night, they talked more easily, sharing stories from their pasts. She learned that he had taught himself to read by studying his mother's Bible and had a surprising love of poetry. He learned that she had been teaching school since she was 18, that she loved mathematics, and had once dreamed of becoming a bookkeeper. "Why did you not?" he asked one night as they sat by the fire. "Women do not do that kind of work. Teaching is acceptable, barely, but anything else would have been scandalous." She poked at the fire with a stick. "I did my father's books for the ranch, but he would never admit to anyone that I was the one managing the finances. Seems foolish wasting talent like that. That is how the world works, maybe, but on a ranch everyone does what they are best at. If you are good with numbers, I would appreciate your help with the books." It was a small thing, but it meant more to Natalie than he probably realized. Thomas had never asked about her skills or interests. He had talked endlessly about his own plans and ambitions, but had never once asked what she wanted or what she was good at. On the 5th day, they reached a small town where they were able to resupply and sleep in actual beds. Zach bought Natalie a proper wedding ring, a simple gold band that fit perfectly. "I know it is late," he said as he slipped it on her finger, "but you should have a real one." "Thank you." She looked at the ring, the gold bright against her tanned skin. It was real in a way the brass band had never been. They also bought more practical clothes for Natalie. Riding in dresses was difficult, and Zach suggested she might be more comfortable in men's pants. The shopkeeper was scandalized, but Natalie was past caring what people thought. The pants were indeed much more comfortable. and she found she could ride more easily and help more with camp chores without worrying about her skirts. As they traveled further north, entering Utah territory, the landscape became more dramatic. Red rocks towered above them, carved into fantastic shapes by wind and water. Zach had been right. It was beautiful in a harsh, wild way. They passed other travelers occasionally, but for the most part they were alone with the land and each other. Natalie found herself watching Zach more often, noticing things about him. The way he was always alert but never seemed tense. The gentleness with which he treated the horses. The patience he showed when teaching her something new. The way his face softened when he talked about his ranch. He was a good man, she realized. Not exciting or romantic in the way Thomas had pretended to be, but solid and real and trustworthy. One evening, about 2 weeks into their journey, they made camp near a river. The weather had been hot all day, and the water looked inviting. "I am going to wash up downstream," Natalie announced. "Do not follow me." Zach's cheeks reddened slightly. "I will stay here. Take your time." The water was cold but wonderful, washing away the dust and sweat of the day. Natalie bathed quickly, always aware that they were in isolated country where danger could appear without warning. When she returned to camp, Zach took his turn bathing upstream. That night, sitting by the fire, Zach suddenly asked, "Are you sorry you came?" "What? No. Why would you think that?" "Just wondering. This is not an easy journey and you did not have much time to think about what you were agreeing to." Natalie considered her answer carefully. "I am not sorry. It is hard, yes, and sometimes I wonder if I am crazy. But I would rather be here, doing this, than back in Casa Grande being pitied and gossiped about. And when we get to Silver Creek, what then? I suppose we see if we can make a real marriage out of this." She met his eyes across the fire. "You have been good to me, Zach, patient and kind." "That is more than I expected. It is just decent behavior, not worthy of praise. You would be surprised how rare decency can be." He looked like he wanted to say something more, but instead he just nodded and added more wood to the fire. The following week they climbed into higher elevations, entering Colorado territory. The air was cooler here, scented with pine. The landscape was greener, more welcoming. Natalie could understand why Zach loved this place. After the harsh desert of Arizona, Colorado felt like a different world. "We are about 3 days from Silver Creek now," Zach said one morning. He seemed more relaxed, more talkative. "I sent a telegram from the last town, letting the Hendersons know we were coming. They will spread the word. Folks will probably want to meet you. That is terrifying. They are good people, a bit rough around the edges but friendly," he grinned at her, "and they will be shocked that I came back with a wife." "You did not tell anyone you were thinking about marrying." "I was not thinking about it. It just happened," he sobered, "but I am glad it did." The simple statement made Natalie's heart skip. Over the past 3 weeks, she had grown comfortable with Zach, had learned to trust him. Now she was beginning to feel something more. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of love. The hope that this impulsive, crazy decision might actually work out. On the 22nd day of their journey, they crested a hill and Zach pointed to the valley below. "There. That is Silver Creek." Natalie looked down at the small cluster of buildings nestled in the valley, with a creek running through it that glinted silver in the sunlight, just as he had described. Beyond the town, she could see ranches spread out across the grassland, and further beyond, mountains rose up, their peaks still holding snow despite the summer heat. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "Home," Zach said softly. "Come on, let us go down." They rode into Silver Creek in the late afternoon. It was even smaller than Casa Grande, but it had a friendly, settled feel. People came out of buildings to stare at them, and Natalie could see the curiosity and surprise on their faces. Word had clearly spread that Zach Morgan was bringing home a bride. A heavy-set man came out of the general store, his face breaking into a wide grin. "Zach Morgan, I will be damned. The telegram was true." "Hello, Tom." Zach dismounted and shook the man's hand. "This is my wife, Natalie." "Natalie, this is Tom Sawyer. He runs the store." Tom's eyes widened with delight. "Wife, I never thought I would see the day. Welcome to Silver Creek, Mrs. Morgan." "Thank you." Natalie climbed down from Rosie, her legs shaky from the long ride. A woman came hurrying out of the store, wiping her hands on her apron. "Zach, oh my goodness, let me look at her." She came right up to Natalie and took her hands. "I am Mary Sawyer. Welcome, my dear. You must be exhausted from the journey." "I am all right." But Natalie found herself smiling. Mary had a warm, maternal energy that was instantly comforting. "Come inside, both of you. You need a real meal and some rest." Mary started herding them toward the store. "I need to get Natalie out to the ranch," Zach protested. "See the place in daylight." "The ranch will still be there tomorrow. Tonight you stay with us. I will not hear otherwise." Mary's tone brooked no argument. And so they found themselves in the comfortable apartment above the general store, being fed a huge meal while Mary asked questions, and Tom shared all the town gossip from the past month. Other neighbors stopped by, curious about Zach's bride, offering congratulations and welcome. The Hendersons arrived, the couple who owned the neighboring ranch. Paul Henderson was a tall, lean man, probably in his late 30s, and his wife Clara was a quiet, pretty woman around the same age. "We have been keeping an eye on your place," Paul told Zach. "The cattle are doing fine. Had to fix a broken fence on the north pasture, but otherwise no problems." "I appreciate it." Clara had been studying Natalie with friendly interest. "You must be very brave, coming all this way with a man you just met. Or very foolish. I am not sure which yet." Natalie smiled to show she was joking mostly. "Well, we are glad to have another woman in the area. Gets lonely sometimes, being so spread out." Clara patted her hand. "If you need anything at all, you send Zach to fetch me." By the time everyone left and Mary showed them to a small bedroom, Natalie was overwhelmed, but in a good way. These people had welcomed her without judgment, had accepted her presence without asking prying questions. It was so different from Casa Grande, where everyone had known her business and felt entitled to comment on it. "They like you," Zach said after Mary had closed the door, giving them privacy. "I knew they would. They are kind." Natalie sat on the bed, suddenly exhausted. "Is your ranch far from here?" "About 5 miles. We will go tomorrow, get you settled in." He hesitated. "I want you to know I understand if it is not what you expected. The house is small and it needs work, but it is solid and we can make it better." "Zach, I am not expecting a mansion. I grew up on a small ranch, remember? As long as it has a roof and walls, it will be fine." He looked relieved. They prepared for bed, the routine familiar now after 3 weeks of travel. Natalie found herself oddly reluctant for the journey to be over. Traveling together, just the two of them, had created a kind of intimacy that would now be disrupted by normal life. What if they could not maintain what they had built on the trail? The next morning, after a huge breakfast prepared by Mary, they finally rode out to the ranch. It was a beautiful ride, following the creek through the valley. The grass was green here, not the brown scrub of Arizona, and wildflowers dotted the meadows. Cattle grazed peacefully, looking up as they passed. Zach's ranch came into view and Natalie felt her breath catch. The house was small, as he had said, but it was prettily situated near the creek, with mountains rising behind it. The barn was solid-looking, and there were several outbuildings. It was rough and simple, but it had a quality of rightness about it, as if it belonged exactly where it was. "Well." Zach's voice was anxious. "What do you think?" "I think it is perfect." And she meant it. He helped her dismount, then led her to the house. Like I said, it is just 2 rooms right now. I have been planning to expand, add more bedrooms and a bigger kitchen. The house was indeed small, but it was clean and well built. The main room served as kitchen and living area, with a fireplace for heat and cooking, a table and chairs, and a battered but comfortable-looking sofa. The bedroom was tiny, just big enough for a bed and a dresser. But the windows let in good light, and she could hear the creek burbling outside. "It is wonderful," Natalie said, and saw the tension leave Zach's shoulders. "I will move into the barn for now, until we can add on another room," he said. "You can have the bedroom. Zach, this is your house. I am not going to kick you out to the barn. It is your house too now." He set down her bags. "We will figure it out." They spent the rest of the day settling in. Zach showed her around the property, introduced her to the cattle, explained his plans for the ranch. Natalie unpacked her belongings, finding places for her mother's sewing machine and books. She set up the kitchen the way she liked it, and began planning what she would cook for their first meal in their new home. That evening they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. It had been exactly 3 weeks since that awful morning in Casa Grande, when Natalie had been abandoned at the altar. 3 weeks since Zach had ridden into her life and offered her an escape. It felt like much longer. It felt like she had always been here in this place, with this man. "Are you happy?" Zach asked quietly. Natalie thought about it. "Yes, I think I am, or at least I am beginning to be." "That is all I can ask." He was quiet for a moment. "Thank you for taking a chance on me. I know it was not easy. Thank you for offering." She turned to look at him. "I mean that. You did not have to stop that day. You could have just ridden past. But you stopped and you helped me, and I will always be grateful for that. I am not looking for gratitude. I know, but you have it anyway." She reached over and took his hand, the first time she had initiated physical contact between them. His hand was warm and rough, the hand of a man who worked hard every day. "I want to make this work, Zach. I want to build a real marriage with you." He squeezed her hand gently. "I want that too." They sat there as darkness fell, holding hands, watching stars appear one by one in the vast Colorado sky. It was not a passionate declaration of love. It was something quieter, steadier. It was 2 people choosing each other, deciding to make a life together. And for now, that was enough. The next few weeks were a flurry of activity as Natalie learned the rhythms of ranch life. She had grown up on a ranch, so much of it was familiar, but Zach's operation was different from her father's. He was more methodical, more focused on improvement and growth. He taught her about his breeding program, his plans for expanding the herd, his ideas for making the ranch more profitable. In turn, Natalie took over the household management and the ranch accounts. She discovered that Zach had been keeping terrible records, just rough notes that made no real sense. She set up a proper ledger system, tracking expenses and income, calculating profits and planning for future investments. She also started a garden behind the house, planting vegetables and herbs that would help feed them through the winter. The neighbors were welcoming and helpful. Clara Henderson came by regularly, bringing small gifts and offering advice. Mary Sawyer made sure they had everything they needed from the store. Other ranchers stopped by to say hello and offer assistance if needed. Natalie had worried that she would be lonely, but she quickly found that the community, though small and spread out, was tight-knit and supportive. The only point of tension was the sleeping arrangement. Zach insisted on sleeping in the barn, which was ridiculous. Natalie finally put her foot down about a month after their arrival. "You are sleeping in your own house tonight. We will share the bedroom like married people do." "Natalie, I do not want to make you uncomfortable." "You are not making me uncomfortable. You have been nothing but respectful and kind. I trust you." She met his eyes. We need to stop pretending this is not a real marriage. Maybe it did not start like a normal marriage, but it is real now. So sleep in your own bed. That night, they lay in the bed together, separated by several inches but together nonetheless. Natalie was acutely aware of him beside her, of his warmth and the sound of his breathing. She had been sharing a bed with him on and off during their journey, but this felt different. This felt like a choice, a step forward. Natalie. His voice was quiet in the darkness. Yes, I am falling in love with you. I want you to know that. Her breath caught. She had been feeling the same way but had been afraid to name it. I think I am falling in love with you too. He turned toward her, and she could just make out his face in the moonlight coming through the window. Can I kiss you? Really kiss you, not like in the chapel. In answer, she moved closer and he kissed her gently at first, then with growing passion. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. I am going to add on to this house, he said. Give us more space, a better kitchen, a proper bedroom, but for now, is this all right? This is perfect. And it was. The house was small, their resources were limited, but they had each other and they were building something real. Over the following months, their relationship deepened. They worked side by side during the day, shared meals and quiet evenings, and at night, they came together as husband and wife in every sense. The physical intimacy grew naturally from the friendship and partnership they had built, and Natalie found joy in Zach's touch, in the way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. The ranch thrived under their joint management. Natalie's careful bookkeeping helped them identify areas where they could save money and invest wisely. Zach's hard work and knowledge of cattle meant the herd grew steadily. By the time winter arrived, they had made enough profit to start planning the addition to the house. Winter in Colorado was harsh but beautiful. Snow blanketed the valley, and the temperatures dropped far below what Natalie had ever experienced in Arizona. But the house was warm, the wood stove keeping them comfortable, and she found she did not mind being snowed in. It gave them time to simply be together, to talk and read and plan for the future. On a cold evening in January, Zach presented her with a gift, a small carved wooden box. I made this for you. It is not much, but I thought you could keep your mother's things in it. The box was beautiful, the wood sanded smooth and carved with a delicate pattern of flowers. Oh, Zach, it is lovely. She opened it and carefully placed her mother's cameo and the wedding ring Thomas had given her, which she had kept as a reminder of lessons learned, inside. I wanted you to have something from me, something that showed I was thinking about you. She set the box aside and moved into his arms. I love you, she said. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. I love you too. He kissed the top of her head. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Natalie Morgan. Spring came, and with it, news that made them both nervous and excited. Natalie was pregnant. The doctor from the next town confirmed it during one of his monthly visits to Silver Creek. The baby would come in late September or early October. Zach was simultaneously terrified and thrilled. I do not know how to be a father. I do not know how to be a mother either, Natalie pointed out. We will figure it out together, just like we have figured out everything else. They spent the summer preparing, building a cradle, sewing baby clothes, arguing good-naturedly about names. The addition to the house was completed, giving them a larger bedroom and a separate room for the baby. Natalie marveled at how much had changed in just over a year. She had gone from being abandoned and humiliated to being loved and expecting a child with a man who treated her like a partner in every way. In late September, after a long and difficult labor attended by Clara Henderson and Mary Sawyer, Natalie gave birth to a son. They named him William after Zach's grandfather. He was perfect, tiny and red-faced and loud, and when Zach held him for the first time, There were tears streaming down his face. "He is so small," Zach whispered, cradling William gently. "How is he so small?" "That is how babies are," Mary said with a laugh. "Do not worry, he will grow quick enough. Before you know it, he will be running all over the ranch getting into trouble." The months that followed were exhausting but wonderful. William was a fussy baby, colicky and prone to crying in the middle of the night, but Natalie and Zach took turns walking him and soothing him, working together as they did with everything else. Watching Zach with their son, seeing the gentleness and patience he showed, only made Natalie love him more. By the time William was a year old, he was walking and getting into everything, just as Mary had predicted. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's brown eyes, and he was the delight of the entire community. Everyone in Silver Creek seemed to have a soft spot for the Morgan baby. "We should have another," Zach said one evening as they sat on the porch watching William toddle around the yard, chasing fireflies. "Are you asking or telling?" Natalie raised an eyebrow, asking, always asking. He grinned at her. "I just think William would do well with a brother or sister." "Let us see how this one turns out first," she said, but she was already hoping for more children. She had grown up alone after her mother died, and she wanted William to have siblings, to have the family she had always wished for. 2 years later, they had a daughter, Elizabeth, named after Natalie's mother. She was an easier baby than William had been, content and smiley, with Zach's hazel eyes and Natalie's darker complexion. William was fascinated by his little sister, wanting to help with everything, and Natalie had to constantly remind him to be gentle. The ranch continued to prosper. Zach's careful breeding program paid off, and they were able to expand their herd significantly. Natalie's management of the finances meant they were able to save money and invest in improvements. They added more rooms to the house, built a new barn, improved their fencing. Silver Creek was growing too, with new families moving to the area, a new school being built, more businesses opening. When William was old enough, he started attending the school, walking the 5 miles to town and back each day with other children from neighboring ranches. Elizabeth followed a few years later. Natalie sometimes volunteered to teach, enjoying the chance to use skills she had thought were behind her. Life was not always easy. There were hard winters when they lost cattle, dry summers when the grass did not grow well, illness and injury, and all the normal struggles of ranch life. But they faced everything together, Natalie and Zach, as partners and lovers and best friends. One evening, nearly 10 years after that fateful day in Casa Grande, they sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. William was teaching Elizabeth how to rope a fence post, and her squeals of laughter filled the air. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. "You ever think about that day?" Zach asked. "The day we met, sometimes." Natalie leaned against his shoulder. "It feels like a different life now, a different person. Do you regret it? Any of it? Not even for a second." She turned to look at him, at the face that had become so dear to her. "You saved me that day, Zach. You gave me a chance at a new life when I thought everything was ruined, and you gave me so much more than I ever expected. A home, a family, a partnership, love. You saved me too," he said softly. "I did not even know how lonely I was until you were here. You made this place a home instead of just a house. You made my life full instead of just busy." They kissed, a gentle kiss full of years of love and trust and shared experiences. From the yard they heard William call out, "Gross, parents kissing." Elizabeth just giggled. "They always do that." Natalie and Zach pulled apart, laughing. "Come on, you two," Natalie called. "Time to wash up for supper." As they herded their protesting children inside, Natalie thought about the strange path that had led her here. If Thomas had not abandoned her, if Zach had not ridden past that chapel at exactly that moment, if she had not been brave or desperate enough to say yes to his crazy proposal, none of this would exist. These children, this home, this life they had built together, it had all started with a moment of impulse and faith. She had been wearing a wedding dress, abandoned and humiliated, sitting in the dirt of Casa Grande with no future and no hope. And a passing cowboy had said, "I will marry you today." The simplest of offers, the most impulsive of decisions. And it had led to this, to love and family and a life richer than she could have imagined. That night, after the children were asleep and they were preparing for bed, Zach pulled her close. "I am glad I stopped that day. So am I." She kissed him. "So am I." The years continued to pass, bringing new joys and challenges. When William was 16, he started talking about wanting his own piece of land, about starting his own ranch. Zach helped him stake a claim on adjacent property and taught him everything he knew about cattle and ranching. Elizabeth, meanwhile, showed a talent for teaching and announced her intention to become a school teacher, just like her mother had been. Natalie and Zach also welcomed 2 more children, twin boys named James and Joseph, who arrived when Elizabeth was 5 and William was 7. The twins were a handful, always getting into mischief together, but they brought new life and energy to the household. The house had to be expanded yet again to accommodate the growing family. As Natalie entered her 40s, she sometimes looked at the life she had built with wonder. She had 4 healthy, happy children. She had a husband who still looked at her with love after more than 20 years of marriage. She had a home that was comfortable and welcoming, a community that valued her, work that was meaningful. It was nothing like the life she had imagined when she was a young woman in Casa Grande, dreaming of romance and adventure. It was better. It was real. It was built on honesty and partnership, and the decision, made new each day, to choose each other. The foundation was solid because it had been built carefully, brick by brick, year by year. Silver Creek had grown significantly over the years, now boasting a population of nearly 1,000 people. The town had a proper church, multiple stores, a bank, even a small newspaper. The Morgan family was well respected in the community. Zach served on the town council, and Natalie was involved in organizing community events and running the women's auxiliary at the church. One day, a letter arrived from Arizona. It was from a lawyer in Casa Grande, informing Natalie that her father had passed away and had left his small ranch to her. She stood in the kitchen holding the letter, feeling a complicated mixture of emotions. She had written to her father occasionally over the years, short letters updating him on her life, but he had never responded. She had made peace with his disapproval long ago, but this final ending still hurt. Zach found her crying quietly at the kitchen table. "What is it? What happened?" She handed him the letter. He read it, then pulled her into his arms. "I am sorry, love. He never forgave me for leaving, for not listening to him. He was wrong not to. Look at what you built, what we built together. He should have been proud of you. I wish he had met the children. I wish he had known you, really known you, so he would understand that I made the right choice." Maybe he did know, somewhere in his heart, and maybe he could not admit it because it meant admitting he was wrong. Zach stroked her hair. "Do you want to go to Arizona for the funeral?" "It is too far, and by the time we got there, he would already be buried." She wiped her eyes. "But I should go at some point, settle the estate, decide what to do with the ranch." A month later, Natalie and Zach made the journey to Casa Grande, leaving the children with the Hendersons. The trip was strange and melancholy. Casa Grande looked smaller than Natalie remembered, shabbier. Her father's ranch was in disrepair, neglected in his final years. They met with the lawyer, signed papers, and arranged to sell the property. Natalie kept only a few personal items, her mother's things that her father had preserved. Standing in the house where she had grown up, Natalie felt like she was looking at the life of a stranger. The girl who had lived here, who had been so desperate to escape, felt impossibly young and naive. She was grateful to her for having the courage to accept Zach's offer, but she barely recognized her. "Are you all right?" Zach asked, coming to stand beside her. "Yes, just thinking about how much has changed." She looked around one last time. "I am ready to go home now. To Silver Creek." Yes, home. And she realized that Silver Creek was home in a way Casa Grande had never been. It was the place where she had become herself, where she had built the life she wanted, where she belonged. They returned to Colorado, to their children and their ranch and their community. Life continued its steady rhythm, the seasons turning, the children growing. William got married to a sweet girl from town and started his own ranch. Elizabeth went to Denver to attend the teacher's college and came back qualified to teach. The twins, now in their teens, showed signs of wanting to follow different paths. James interested in medicine and Joseph in ranching like his father and older brother. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The house was full of noise and laughter, children running everywhere, neighbors stopping by with gifts and congratulations. Natalie looked around at the gathering, at all these people who had become part of their lives, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. That evening, after everyone had left and they were alone, Zach gave her a gift. It was a leather-bound journal, beautiful and expensive, not something they would normally spend money on. "I thought you might want to write down your story," he said. "Our story. So the children and grandchildren will know how we started." "That is a wonderful idea." She opened the journal, running her hand over the blank pages. "What should I call it?" "Call it what it is. The truth." He smiled at her. "The story of how I was passing through Arizona and saw a woman in a wedding dress who needed help." So Natalie began to write, recording their story from that fateful morning in Casa Grande to the present day. She wrote about fear and hope, about taking chances and building trust, about the slow growth of love between two strangers who decided to make a life together. She wrote about their children and their ranch, and the community they had found in Silver Creek. She wrote honestly about the hard times and the good times, about arguments and reconciliations, about the daily work of marriage and partnership. The children loved hearing the story, though they had heard parts of it before. They were particularly fascinated by the idea of their mother being abandoned at the altar and their father offering to marry her after knowing her for less than an hour. It seemed impossibly romantic and reckless to them, which it had been. But it had also been brave and honest, and it had worked. As Natalie and Zach entered their later years, they began to slow down, handing over more of the ranch work to William and Joseph, who were now running the operation together. Elizabeth was teaching in Silver Creek, married to the doctor who had taken over the practice when the old doctor retired. The twins had given them 6 grandchildren so far, with more on the way. Natalie's hair had turned gray, and Zach's face was deeply lined by years in the sun, but they were both healthy and active. They spent their days helping with the grandchildren, maintaining the house and garden, and simply enjoying each other's company. They had earned their rest, and they took pleasure in the simple quiet of their days. One afternoon, they were sitting on the porch, the same porch where they had sat so many evenings over the years, watching the sun set. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had just kept riding that day?" Zach asked. "Sometimes. But then I remember that you did not keep riding. You stopped, and everything else followed from that choice. Best decision I ever made." "Best decision we both made," Natalie corrected, I could have said no. I could have refused to take the chance, but I did not. Why did you say yes? Really, I have never asked. Natalie thought about it. I think because you were honest. Thomas had lied about everything, made promises he never intended to keep. But you told me exactly what you had to offer and what you wanted in return. There was no romance, no pretty words, just the truth. And somehow that felt safe, or at least safer than anything else I had at that moment. I figured a man who was honest when he had no reason to be might be worth trusting. I am glad you trusted me. Me too. She reached over and took his hand, their fingers intertwining automatically. I love you, Zachary Morgan. I have loved you for so long now that I cannot really remember not loving you. I love you too, Natalie Morgan. You are the best part of my life. You always have been. They sat together as the sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors. The same sunset they had watched thousands of times, but always beautiful, always new. From inside the house, they could hear the sounds of family, grandchildren laughing, Elizabeth calling someone to supper. Their family. Their legacy. All of it built on a foundation of that one crazy, impulsive, brave decision to marry a stranger and build a life together. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Natalie thought about the girl in the wedding dress, sitting in the dust of Casa Grande, heartbroken and humiliated. She wished she could tell that girl that everything would be all right, that the cowboy who stopped would change her life in ways she could not imagine, that saying yes to his impossible offer would lead to more happiness than she had ever dreamed possible. That sometimes the worst day of your life was actually the beginning of the best part of your life. But that girl would learn all of that in time, just as Natalie had. She would learn that love did not always look like the stories said it should. That sometimes it started with a simple, honest offer and grew slowly over years of shared work and shared life. That the truest love was not the kind that swept you off your feet, but the kind that stood beside you, steady and reliable, through all the ordinary and extraordinary moments that made up a life. Years continued to pass in the peaceful rhythm of their later life. When Natalie was 65 and Zach was 68, they celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary with another big gathering. All 4 of their children were there with their families. William's ranch had become one of the most successful in the region, and he and his wife had 3 children of their own. Elizabeth had become the principal of Silver Creek School and had 2 children. James had indeed become a doctor and was practicing in Denver, but came home for the celebration with his wife and their baby daughter. Joseph had taken over the original Morgan Ranch completely now and was married with 4 children. Natalie counted 14 grandchildren at the party, ranging from infants to teenagers, and felt almost dizzy with abundance. How had she and Zach, 2 people who had started with nothing but hope and determination, created all of this? It seemed impossible, miraculous even. "Grandmother, tell us the story again," one of the granddaughters begged after dinner, "about how you and grandfather met." So Natalie told the story once more, with Zach adding details and corrections. The children listened with rapt attention, even though they had heard it before. It never got old, this story of their grandparents' unusual beginning. "Was not grandfather worried you might be a terrible wife?" one of the older grandsons asked. "Probably," Zach admitted. "But I figured even a terrible wife was better than no wife at all, and I was betting she was not terrible." "Good bet," Natalie said with a laugh. "Was not grandmother scared grandfather might be a criminal or something?" one of the granddaughters asked. "Terrified," Natalie admitted. "But I was also scared of staying where I was and never having a chance at anything better." Sometimes you have to choose between different kinds of fear and hope that you are choosing right. And you chose right. Elizabeth said, smiling at her parents. You both did. That night, after everyone had left or gone to bed, Natalie and Zach sat on their porch one more time. It was a warm summer night, much like the night when they had first arrived at the ranch all those years ago. 40 years, Zach said wonderingly. Sometimes it feels like 40 minutes, sometimes like 400 years. I know what you mean. There are moments from that first day that feel like yesterday, and then I look at our grandchildren and realize how much time has actually passed. You have any regrets? Anything you wish had been different? Natalie thought about it seriously. No. There are things that were hard, times when I was scared or sad or angry. But I do not regret any of it because it all led here. What about you? Only one regret. I wish I had been riding through Casa Grande an hour earlier, so you would not have had to sit there in that wedding dress feeling humiliated for so long. She laughed and leaned against his shoulder. Ever the romantic. I try. He kissed the top of her head. Thank you for saying yes that day. Thank you for taking a chance on a stranger with nothing but a horse and a ranch and a promise to treat you decent. Thank you for offering. Thank you for being exactly who you said you were, for keeping your promises, for loving me even when I was difficult. You were never difficult. Spirited, maybe, stubborn occasionally, but never difficult. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the creek and the night sounds of the ranch. Finally, Natalie said, "We should probably write a letter to William, telling him what we want done when we die. Just so everything is clear and there are no arguments. Planning to die soon." Zach's tone was light, but she could hear the edge underneath. Not planning to, no, but we are not young anymore. It is the responsible thing to do to make sure everything is arranged. She squeezed his hand. Besides, I want to be buried here on this land, and I want to be next to you. I figure we should put that in writing. Agreed. Though I plan to stick around for a good while yet. I want to see more grandchildren, maybe even some great-grandchildren. That sounds like a good plan to me. And they did see more. They lived to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary, a milestone that brought congratulations from all over the region. By then, they had 20 grandchildren and had just welcomed their first great-grandchild, a little girl born to William's oldest son. Natalie held the baby, marveling at the tiny perfection of her, and thought about continuity and legacy. This little girl would never know the scared woman in the wedding dress or the young cowboy who had stopped to help her. But she was part of their story nonetheless, part of what they had built together. Zach's health began to fail the winter after their 50th anniversary. It was nothing dramatic, just a slow decline, his strength ebbing day by day. He could no longer ride or do much work, but he remained cheerful, sitting on the porch when the weather was good, reading or watching the activity of the ranch. Natalie stayed close, taking care of him the way he had taken care of her through various illnesses over the years. It was her turn to be the strong one. "I am sorry," he said one day when she was helping him back to bed after a spell of dizziness. "I know this is not how you want to spend your later years, nursing an invalid." "Hush. You are not an invalid, you are my husband, and there is nowhere else I would rather be than here with you." She settled him into bed and sat beside him. "Remember what you said to me that first day. That you would take care of me. Well, now I get to take care of you. Fair is fair," he smiled weakly. "I got the better end of this bargain. I have had you for 50 wonderful years. And I have had you. Stop talking like it is over. You are just sick. You will get better." But they both knew he would not. Zach died peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks later with Natalie holding his hand. He was 76 years old, and he had lived a good, honest, productive life. The whole community came to his funeral, filling the church and spilling out into the street. They buried him on the ranch, in a spot with a view of the mountains he had loved. Natalie mourned him deeply. the grief a physical ache in her chest. For 51 years, he had been her partner, her friend, her love. The ranch felt empty without him, even though it was filled with children and grandchildren who came to check on her. She moved through her days mechanically, doing the necessary tasks, but feeling like a piece of her soul had been ripped away. But gradually, as the months passed, the sharp edge of grief dulled. She began to remember the good times more than the ending, to smile when she thought of him instead of only crying. She kept herself busy, helping Elizabeth with the school, spending time with the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, working on her journal. She wrote down everything she could remember about Zach, all the little details that made him who he was, so that the family would never forget him. Natalie lived for another 5 years after Zach died. They were quiet years, peaceful but lonely. She spent them surrounded by family, watching the ranch and the community continue to grow, secure in the knowledge that what she and Zach had built would endure. When she died at the age of 78, it was suddenly a heart attack while she was sitting in the garden. The family took comfort in the fact that she had not suffered, that she had simply slipped away while enjoying the flowers she loved. They buried her next to Zach, just as she had requested, and the whole town came to the funeral. Elizabeth read from the journal her mother had kept, sharing the story of how Natalie and Zach had met and married and built their life together. There was not a dry eye in the church. On the headstones, which William commissioned to be made from fine marble, the inscriptions read simply, Zachary Morgan, 1852–1928, beloved husband and father, and Natalie Morgan, 1856–1934, beloved wife and mother. But underneath Natalie's inscription, William had added one more line at the suggestion of Elizabeth. She said yes, because that had been the beginning of everything. A woman in a wedding dress, abandoned and humiliated, sitting in the dust of Casa Grande. A cowboy passing through, offering an impossible solution. And a brave word, a simple yes, that changed 2 lives and created a legacy that would endure for generations. The Morgan Ranch remained in the family, passed down through William's line. The story of Zachary and Natalie became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The journal Natalie had kept was preserved and treasured, a window into the past, a reminder of where they had all come from. And every year on the anniversary of that fateful wedding day, the family would gather at the ranch and raise a toast to Natalie and Zach, to their courage and their love and their determination to make a life together against all odds. Because sometimes love did not start with passion or romance. Sometimes it started with honesty and necessity and a willingness to take a chance. Sometimes it began with a simple offer and a brave answer. Sometimes the greatest love stories were not about finding the perfect person, but about choosing to build a perfect life with an imperfect person, day by day, year by year, through all the challenges and joys that came your way. And sometimes, just sometimes, a passing cowboy and a woman in a wedding dress could create something that would last long after they were gone, something that would echo through generations, a testament to the power of saying yes when it mattered most.